Joining us on the line right now is a former world-class world television champion, a former world-class tag team champion, and, of course, a world-class six-man tag team champion. This is a very rare interview. He is Mr. Lance Von Erich. Lance, welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling.
Hey, former Lance Von Erich. Well, thank you.
Yes. And, of course, the new book coming out by yourself and Vinnie Berry, Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. What was it like kind of going down memory lane, not being a part of the business for about 35 years, and coming up with this great book?
Well, I met Barry by Facebook Messenger, and he said, would I be interested in doing a book? And I liked, several people before had asked me to do it. And I turned him down, and then Barry came along, and I don't know. I like what he had to say, and so we collaborated for the last 2 years and came out with a book.
And it's so interesting because you really have been very selective, and you haven't been a part of the wrestling business for a very long time. What about it kind of made you want to do it? I mean, was it something that you felt like you had to finally maybe get your story out there?
Well, I don't know. I've lived out of the country since since I left World Class, and never really thought about wrestling anymore. I never was a wrestling fan, didn't watch wrestling, and I finished my career in South Africa, and it afforded me to do a lot of other things that I wouldn't have been able to do. People were like, "Oh man, it's terrible that you left World Class. It must be hard." And in reality, it wasn't. It was great because I got to go into acting. I got to do television commercials, and I opened up health clubs. So it was good. It was good to me, and it was. I think I did better when I actually left World Class than I would have if I stayed around.
Yeah, that is interesting because you think like, oh, wow, wrestling fans thinking like, wow, it must have stunk that you left the wrestling business. But you're saying it actually ended up being better for you because you got into other things, and maybe wrestling may have helped with your acting and your TV. Do you kind of feel that way?
Well, of course it did, because like I said, I wouldn't have, because I was very over in South Africa with the wrestling, and I don't know if things would have worked out the same in the States. And who knows? You never know, Could have very well been that I'd gone to the WWF. But it didn't happen that way, so who knows? But it came out okay with me. I'm still alive, and a lot of those guys aren't.
Yeah. Very, very true. Now, you mentioned you weren't a wrestling fan. You had no aspirations of getting into the wrestling business. How did you kind of get into the wrestling business? I guess David Manning found you, but how did that all kind of go down? How did that actually come to be?
Yeah, well, Vinny, you actually, you could probably tell them better than me.
Well, he was discovered by David Manning on the golf course in Arlington, and was just intrigued by his body, and he was just invited down to the Sportatorium, and then he went down to the Sportatorium and met with Fritz. Why don't you take it from your meeting with Fritz there?
I'm sorry?
What was it like meeting Fritz Von Erich?
I didn't know who he was, really. I mean, I've seen the Von Erichs on television a couple of times. But he was kind of an intimidating guy. Didn't have a lot of, he didn't have a lot to say. Just have I ever thought about wrestling, and how much did I weigh, and would I be interested in wrestling, and had a couple of people look at me. I met with David Manning, and also Ken Mantell, and also a couple other guys, and he looks the part. So that was my first meeting. That was about it.
And did you think like, hey, this is for me, or like what was your mindset thinking? Maybe more financially. What were you thinking as far as getting into wrestling?
Well, I thought they were. I drove up in a Jaguar, and I remember people asking me when I first had driven up. Not the first time. I guess the second time. So, why do you want to go into wrestling? I said, well, it's not that I want to. I was approached by these guys, and they said, you gotta, you're selling real estate there, and you gotta, because I told them I was selling real estate, and you're driving a Jaguar. What would you ever want to get in this business for? And I thought there was a lot of money that could be made in wrestling. That's the way they kind of laid it out to me.
Yeah, it definitely, especially during the '80s too. It was the boom period of wrestling. They called the golden era of wrestling. So when you first got in and they're talking to you about training and stuff, what do they say to you? They say they're going to send you out to Portland, or they say they're going to keep you close. How does that kind of conversation go down?
Well, they actually would come. They told me to come down and work out a couple of times a week, and Fritz made different people come down with me. All the people that were world class at the time, and sometimes they showed up, sometimes they didn't, and Kevin and Kerry would pop in every once in a while and look for a couple of minutes. I think that Fritz wanted them to actually train me, but they just came by, and nobody wants to sit there for 2 hours and train somebody. It's not a lot of fun. If you're forced to do it, especially you don't really want to be there. So I think that he thought that Kevin and Kerry were going to go down there and train me, and he probably sent them, but obviously they just sat there for a couple of minutes and then took off. So yeah, I had an idea. They said, well, listen, we're gonna work with you for a couple of months here, and then we're gonna send you off somewhere, maybe for Florida, maybe Portland. There's a guy in Portland that would be a good place for you. They don't get too much national television. Are you interested in going? And I said, well, they didn't ask me really if I was interested in going. They said, this would be probably what you would do. So that would be the idea because it's got the least amount of television coverage.
And I guess you would meet Don Owen out there for Pacific Northwest. And what was it like kind of meeting him and getting out there and getting a taste of Portland wrestling?
Well, I like Portland, actually. It's a beautiful state. And, I met Don, and they gave me a push from the word go. And in the book, you have to read the book, obviously, but I lived with Billy Jack Haynes for a few months there, and Sandy Barr, actually, who was one of the referees, actually trained me. I probably learned the most from Sandy Barr and a couple of the local Jerry Gray, local talent there.
What was it like with Billy Jack Haynes? Everyone always says, he's a little eccentric. He could be a little crazy. What was it like with Billy Jack at that point?
I think that Billy Jack had just, he never told me this, but I think just talking from other people that he had just gotten out of prison, and he was living a straight, narrow. He wasn't a partier at the time, and he'd go to the wrestling matches and wouldn't hang around with anybody else. Just me. I would ride with him in his black Corvette to the different towns, and he wasn't eccentric at that time, really. I worked out, he worked out, and we, lived with his uncle. He had bought his uncle's house because his uncle was having financial problems, and lived with him for a few months.
And what did you think about the actual wrestling there? Were you learning a lot? Did you enjoy it? Were you actually starting to like pro wrestling at that point in Portland?
I don't know if I ever really liked wrestling. I didn't dislike it. I was hoping that I could make some decent money at it. Yeah, but I liked all the wrestlers in Portland. You know, and the territory was pretty small. You didn't have, you know, it wasn't like working in Texas where you one night in. You know, Texas is a big state, first of all.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you know, you be all over the state, and then Louisiana, and Oklahoma, and Alabama, and you know, it was a big territory where Oregon was pretty easy. You know, you always knew that you were going to be in Portland on a Saturday night, and on a Thursday night you were in Salem, which was, I don't know, an hour and a half away, so not a hard, you know, wasn't a bad trip from Portland. And then Eugene would be on a Friday, which was a little further than, you know, Salem. So we knew at least 3 nights out of the, well, we didn't work on Sundays typically, but you knew 4 out of the 7 nights you're going to be someplace close.
And I guess you were Ricky Vaughn, right, at this point?
I was Ricky Vaughn at that time, yeah.
Is that something that you wanted to be Ricky Vaughn, or they just gave you that name and you went with it?
No, they took it for me. I had no choice. It was, hey, you're Ricky Vaughn. Okay.
Now, as far as kind of being out there, you win the tag titles with Billy Jack Haynes, and you know, you get a bit of a push. You win the heavyweight championship over Mike Miller. Did you kind of feel like you were getting a groove and starting to really get a hang of this wrestling thing?
Well, you know, I mean, I was pushed into something that I wasn't ready for, and you know, Don knew that. You know, he didn't know exactly, but he knew that that most probably I wasn't going to be in Portland a long time. He wanted to keep me in Portland, and he told me, "Listen, you need to hang around here an extra couple of years, and then you can go to the WWF. But if you go back to the, you know, to Dallas, they're gonna eat you up. You're just not ready for it."
Did you ever think about going to the WWF, or that wasn't really on your radar?
The WWF?
Yeah.
No, you know, I mean, but it really wasn't on my radar. What I was thinking is that, you know, because truly, if it had worked out the right way, and I mean, television was done right in Dallas, and you know, they had done the right thing for. You know, because what happened was that they would just churn people out. You know, they'd bring them in and, you know, kind of use them up, and then they would go to a different territory. So the Von Erichs were the ones that were always, you know, over there. And I think that if they had told a better storyline and kind of worked it a little bit better, that, you know, it would have been a great thing to be a Von Erich, but it turned out that it wasn't such a great thing. It was very difficult, you know, for many reasons. One is that I was working, you know, because the Von Erichs there was always something wrong with them. You know, they couldn't make the towns for whatever reason. But I ended up wrestling twice a day.
Now, as far as becoming a Von Erich, when you leave Portland and you go to World Class in late '85, how does that kind of happen? Is Fritz telling you, okay, now you're Lance Von Erich, you're not Ricky Vaughn? Like, how does that whole thing go down?
No, they actually told me beforehand they're going to bring you in as a cousin. You know, they'd already preset this up, I guess, in, you know, years before, because I think if they thought about that, you know, that down the road they're going to need somebody. Obviously, it came faster than they thought because of David Von Erich and, you know, Mike getting sick, and, you know, so I think it just came a lot faster than what they had thought.
Yeah, Mike Von Erich got toxic shock, and, you know, you kind of, I guess, brought in his replacement. Obviously, David passes away. They say, you know, if David hadn't passed away, you know, maybe there wouldn't have been a Lance. Do you ever think about stuff like that, or that's not really stuff that you tend to think about?
No, it didn't really matter. I mean, I was going to, you know, I knew whatever I was going to do, I was going to make money, and, you know, it just at that time, you know, the Von Erichs were huge, and, you know, I thought for a minute that, I mean, I thought these guys were making huge amounts of money. Huge amounts. I mean, if you watch the storyline on television, these guys are, wrestling for, I don't know, whatever it was, thousands and thousands of dollars. So I just thought because of the television, that they were making some decent money.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously with the Von Erichs at that point in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, they were drawing crazy. Sportatorium was always crazy. They're running the Reunion Arena. I mean, that's pretty big. I mean, they were definitely drawing thousands of fans for sure.
Well, when I started, in reality, the Texas, when I came in on the Texas show, I mean, it was it was huge, but I kind of hit it at the wrong time. I should have been there, and they didn't need me earlier, and I wasn't around earlier. But, if I had been there a few years earlier, I just missed it. Each one of the, the big shows that they had was smaller and smaller and smaller. They just weren't drawing the houses that they were.
Yeah, they were saying like years before, like the David tribute show with Kerry winning the NWA title versus Rick. I mean, that was just a crazy drawing house. You're right; it was kind of down each year after that, and I feel like they really needed another Von Erich. So obviously, you come in and you're the cousin. When they start bringing you in, do fans say anything? Like, I know you're supposed to be the son of Waldo Von Erich, who was Fritz's brother, but do the fans say anything? Like, oh, is he really a Von Erich? Like, how did that all go down?
Not really. Nobody really said so. I only had one time that somebody had said something. They wanted to believe it, Even if they didn't believe it, they wanted to believe it. So I never really had a problem with that. And I was doing, quite frankly, I was doing a lot of, I wasn't making a lot of money, wrestling. None of us were, really, but where I was making money, which I don't know if Fritz wanted me to do it or not, but I was doing a lot of, television commercials, and I was appearances that I was making money. And my pictures, I was smart enough to take pictures with, because Kerry's pictures were selling really well. But I don't know if you've ever seen the pictures that I'd taken with, a leopard and with machine gun, a movie that I was casted for, had a machine gun, and dressed in, I had an RPG on my back, and those pictures actually sold really, really well. I only got 50 cents on every picture, and they outsold Terry's pictures even, and Kevin and Mike's, I was selling a lot more pictures, and I think I was the only wrestler that was getting, money for those other than the Von Erichs, and, they weren't really paying me for the pictures I was selling, so I was a little bit upset. That's part of the reason that I, at the end, left as well.
Yeah, not getting the fair shake. And it's interesting, look, if you look at like pictures of you, and like you mentioned that awesome one with the machine gun and stuff, obviously you're big, you're huge, you're in great shape. Did you think you looked like the Von Erichs? It's obviously very similar body to Kerry Von Erich. Do you think that you look like them enough to be cousins?
Well, I guess so, because I was more of a Von Erich than they were. At least my name's Vaughn. So, yeah, I think so. I mean, I was in really, really great shape until I went to work for World Class. If you look on the front of the book, on the left-hand side of the book, you can see how much better shape I was in South Africa. I literally went, and I'm better shape now than I was back wrestling with him, because I was either injured or I was wrestling twice a day, so I didn't have time to work out. That's another reason that I actually, I'd actually wanted to leave. It's because I couldn't work out. I couldn't do the things that I like to do in my body. I think I look horrible during that time, because, I was actually bigger than Kerry. If you look in some of the pictures, there's a picture in the book, I think, of me in India. I was 315 pounds in India and cut up, so I was actually bigger than Kerry. But Kerry had a great body. But because I was, wrestling and injured all the time, I couldn't do anything.
Is that something that they never bring up to you either? It's like beforehand, it's like, hey, if you're injured, you just wrestle hurt, you wrestle hurt. Is that something that they ever kind of bring up to you?
No, of course not. But you have to be there. You got to be there. You have a Von Erichs didn't because they had somebody else to take their place. But for me, if I didn't go, I was in trouble. Matter of fact, I remember them telling Steve Simpson, because he was a good friend of mine, and also I got him into world class. They said, "Listen, you're in charge with Lance. You get into the towns, and you don't be late. That's your job." And he was like, "What the hell? Why do I have to do that?" I mean, he didn't say that, but I know that's what he thought.
He was responsible.
Kinda, and it wasn't his job. I think he felt a little bit, because I did get him and his family into Dallas. Because if not, I don't know if they would have ever ended up in Dallas.
And you're right. There's a great picture in the book, and it's crazy because Kerry Von Erich is known as being one of the biggest guys and one of the best bodies. You were kind of bigger than him and kind of more cut up than him at one point. Kind of amazing. Is that because of the bodybuilding background, your weightlifting background?
Genetics and bodybuilding background, and so I mean, like I said, even now at this point, right, I'm 270 pounds and I'm cut up right now, and I'm 60 years old, so I'm in better shape than I was when I was, whenever I was working for World Class, a lot better shape, and that's kind of sad.
Crazy. Now, as far as kind of the Von Erichs, talking about Kerry Von Erich and stuff, what was the relationship like with Kerry? Were you guys close at all, or was it standoffish a little?
No, very good. I liked him. He liked me. I don't think there was anybody in that whole group that ever that I ever felt that didn't like me, other than the fact Kevin didn't like me. I didn't care for Kevin. I didn't dislike him. I didn't like him. He was there. But I didn't have a lot in common with him. Mike and Chris were on their own pluck. They did their own thing, and I really didn't ever get to know. I don't think anybody ever got to know them. They were kind of, off on the side. Didn't talk to anybody really a lot. They just did their own thing, and I think that Chris was, a lot younger, and obviously Mike seemed not so grown up. He seems kind of childish in a way, not in a bad way, but because he was around Chris a lot, and Chris was a lot younger, so they thought a little bit differently. And I'm sure that Mike didn't want to be a wrestler. I'm sure of it. That their father put a lot of pressure on the guys.
Yeah, you think about it, it's like they basically are born into the business. They have to be in the business. They're thrown out in front of the fans, in front of the crowds, and they're a Von Erich. They're going to have some pressure on them. Did you feel that same pressure? Like, hey, I'm a Von Erich. There's going to be a ton of pressure on me to perform.
Yeah, of course. Just by being part of that. Yeah, of course. And especially because I wasn't lucky enough, or I guess you call it luck, but these guys were wrestling with their father when they were 8 years old. They grew up watching it, and most wrestlers, quite frankly, like Kaninsky and a bunch of them, the Rock, they all come from I'm just using a couple just that I'm thinking of just right now, but many come from their wrestling background. Their fathers were wrestlers, and that's what they always wanted to do. They aspired to do that. Even there's a lot of them that told me that even if they didn't get paid, they would wrestle. That's how much they loved it.
Wow, that's kind of a different thing to say. I mean, you're in the business to make money, right?
Well, it wasn't well. I sure was, which I didn't do, but that was the idea. But a lot of these guys are just happy, to be on a road and to wrestle. They, and it's kind of funny because how when you're in front of a lot of people, it's it's very easy to wrestle. You don't feel the bumps and all that, but when you have a small, like in many towns in Oregon we would go to, and it'd be a very small crowd, where you'd have like 100 people in the audience. It was very difficult to get out and get motivated and put on a good show. And it's crazy how different it was. And funny enough, in South Africa, we grew huge houses compared to, the houses in Texas after the first 6 months that I was there. And in Portland, we for sure grew a lot bigger houses in South Africa.
So the adrenaline's pumping. It's easier to work, get motivated, and not feel the bumps as much.
Right. When I went to India and wrestled, we had crowds of 40,000, 50,000 people.
Oh, wow. Wow, amazing. That's crazy. The fan base, who knew that it was out there. How did you kind of get out there?
Well, they didn't know any of us. That's the funny thing. They didn't even know any of us. They were starved at that time for entertainment. I'm sure that they saw the WWF, and they kind of sold us as the WWF. So we grew some big houses without having them know any of the wrestlers. I mean, Kamala was on a card with me, and they might have known him, but the rest of the wrestlers that I wrestled with, none of them, they didn't know him, and they still grew some big houses. Singapore as well, Malaysia as well.
Like, who set up those tours? How did you get involved with going all the way over there to wrestle?
Well, I was already in South Africa, and Dusty Wolf had actually, I don't know if you know Dusty. I'm sure you know.
Oh yeah, I've interviewed him before. Yeah, he's great. Yeah, he's got a couple wrestling books.
Yeah,
too.
He actually was a really good friend of mine. I actually had a lot of respect for him, and he actually contacted me and said he would come over to South Africa and wrestle for one of the promoters. That, and if you read, when the fans read the book, the book's about, just to plug the book a little bit, the book's about, the wrestling and the Von Erichs and but it's also the journey that I had, which was on a train that got bombed and on an airplane that got hijacked, and just a lot of cool, I mean, it wasn't cool at the time, but, to look back, it was pretty interesting to see some of the things that had happened along the way. So it's not only the wrestling and with the Von Erichs, but it's the journey that I had through all that, and living. I've lived in 7 countries. I haven't been back to the States since, 96. I have 2 other citizenships, and I've had an interesting journey in the meantime. So that's telling the story about what's happened in between all that. I had another 10 years of wrestling in South Africa, and anyway, so Dusty hooked me up with a guy that was an Australian promoter, and he was doing Asia, obviously because Australia's in Asia, and so I worked for him several times, and of course we went several times, Dusty and I, to Israel as well, where we were really over. We were big time in Israel.
Yeah, I feel like World Class too was huge in Israel, and that's still to this day. I know the Von Erich kids, Kevin's kids are big. Still to this day are big over there. It's crazy.
Channel 39 was, for that Christian broadcasting, was at Lebanon, and actually it's funny because after I left the Von Erichs, I met a guy in Dallas that was a banker, and I got him to finance a trip over to Israel, and we went, obviously without the Von Erichs, but we took a lot of the world-class wrestlers over there to do it. And the fun thing is, when I went over there, I went a couple of weeks beforehand to do some, because I loved Israel. I learned, I learned Hebrew and spent a lot of time in Israel. And I had a lot of friends there. So before and when the first time we went, to the second and third time we went, and then afterwards for many years I kept going to Israel. But when I actually landed in the airport by myself, there was 30,000 people there to meet me. It was crazy.
They love their wrestling, which is so, you don't think about it because you said it's on that TV station, but they love their wrestling out there.
Well, they love the Von Erichs. That's one, I was over there, and I got to tell you that I had a friend that actually, we bought, remember those old Polaroids where you push the button and the picture would come out?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The camera, and then it would, you could actually, it would within, 60 seconds, it'd be, you could see the picture.
Yeah, you shake it a little bit. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we took over about, myself, about 5,000, I had 5,000 photos, and we charged $10 a picture. And I had my friend drive me all over Israel, and we actually, within a week, charged $10 for each picture, and we sold 5,000 pictures.
Wow!
If I had 100,000, if I had 10,000 rolls or packets of where I could do pictures, I could have made a fortune there, but we just couldn't get the film. It was amazing. There'd be people like 100 deep waiting to take pictures.
Wow, amazing! You think about it, it's like, wow, they really, really, have an affinity for, like you said, for the Von Erichs. They love the name. They love the Von Erichs.
Yeah, just the Von Erichs. I mean, they liked, the other wrestlers, obviously, but the Von Erichs was just so over in the Middle East. I could have put a business in there. Gary could have, truly Gary, if he had put in gyms there, he could have made a fortune, because he was so over there.
Now, back in Texas, you kind of were saying it before, was there any kind of deception when you become Lance Von Erich? I know Kevin says, I feel like maybe we were lying to the fans. Do you feel any deception there, or is that kind of silly to think?
Say it again, I don't understand. I mean, I can't really, I'm in Mexico right now, and that's where I live part of the year. I can barely hear you on the phone. Say it again.
Kevin had said he felt like it was a deception to the fans to bring in a non-Von Erich saying they were Von Erich. Did you ever feel like there was any sort of deception to the fans, or you think that's kind of silly because it's pro wrestling?
Yeah, the whole thing is, the kayfabe, everybody's, the whole thing is a deception. And the only difference, whether it be the storylines or who's related to who, the only deception is that the people wanted to believe the Von Erichs. But just the way they said David Von Erich died. Okay, well, in the personal prayer side, yeah, right. Well, anyway, that's what people wanted to believe, even though they knew it wasn't true. I believe that Kevin, they felt that they were giving me such an opportunity, and I think that Kevin actually felt like I'd betrayed them. Especially Kevin, because, and I don't think they ever had a problem with it until I decided that I kind of held them up. I either wanted to make more money, and I'd been hurt. What happened was I got Nord the Barbarian threw me on my shoulder and messed up my shoulder. So I wanted, and I'd been working a lot, and I needed some time off. And so I just didn't want to come back. I just had enough. They weren't paying me, and, I was working all the time. And, at the time, my marriage was suffering because I was always gone. And, when I left, they just felt like I looked a gift horse in the mouth. They just thought that I had betrayed them, especially Kevin. And so that's why they came up with that. One. And number two is I think that they were really afraid that I was going to go to the WWF.
Yeah, so I guess they kind of say, they reveal you weren't a Von Erich, right? Is that how it goes down? You basically got revealed.
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't even in the country. I think at the time I'd actually taken off and I was done, and I'd heard what they had said on the television. I didn't really care, quite truthfully. I never thought I would ever come back to Texas ever, even to visit. And I think I've been back once to Texas, and that was for a week. I had to do something there. And that was many, many years ago. But I didn't care. I really didn't care. But I think that, I think it was stupid for them to do that. I would have just set sail in the sunset, and they would have never heard from me again, and they could have made up any kind of anything, and it would have been much better.
Yeah, because then it looks like they lied to the fans. You know what I mean? If they would have just let it be, no one would have known.
Of course, they just could have said that, you know what, he had such a bad injury from Nord the Barbarian that he ruined his career, and he's done. And nobody ever talked to me about it except for some of the people that would come over to, South Africa, like Matt Bourne, and he just said, man, it's a good thing that you left when you did, too, because it just turned to shit. But, can I say shit on that?
Oh, yeah, no problem. Oh, yeah.
So, and many people said that. They just said, you know what, and you did a good job under the circumstances. You had a lot of pressure on you. We even Brian Adidas had told me one time. I haven't talked to him but once, in many, many years. But I talked to him on Facebook, not even, not on a telephone. And he said, I just want to tell you, I think you did a really good job with what you had, with all the pressure that you had. And, and I think that a lot of people in the business thought that. There's a few that didn't because, again, they fought like very hard. And I think that Missy Hyatt was probably, we were pretty good friends. The Freebirds, not Terry, because I think he was dead by the time, Michael Hayes, he didn't like this side, but it kind of messed up their storyline too, because they were all working around the Von Erichs, and when I was gone, I guess they, it was only, I guess Kevin and Kerry partially, because he was all messed up with his foot.
Yeah, it's like the Von Erichs and Freebirds, that epic rivalry that was such a big deal down there, and you were kind of right in the midst of it for a brief time there.
Yeah, and also with Gino and Chris, so I was kind of in between that too, and it hurt the storyline for those guys, especially when they wanted to wrestle, So.
Yeah, and there was, besides like the Von Erich death and Gino Hernandez, there was so much tragedy and craziness going on in World Class. It just seemed like it was almost cursed at one point with all the deaths and all the craziness surrounding him.
One point. Look at it. Look at all the people that have, Chris Adams dead. Gino Hernandez dead. Buzz Sawyer dead. Matt Bourne dead. Ultimate Warrior dead. The Von Erichs, all of them, but Kevin dead. It's just crazy that, so many people from that territory, more than any other territory, probably, I don't know, but I'm guessing double the amount. You got, Rick Rude dead. It's just, to me, it's just amazing.
Bruiser Brody, too, if you think about it.
Bruiser Brody.
Did you have any sort of relationship with Brody while we bringing him up?
Yep. Pretty good relationship with him, actually. I like him, and he was a smart guy. And he was there with me on the tour to Israel, and he actually got there a little earlier too. I think I got there a month early, and he got there a week before we started, to do any television or to do any doing of the shows. And I spent a week traveling with him doing some publicity. He was a good guy. I liked him.
And you also mentioned there, just briefly, the Ultimate Warrior, who was the Dingo Warrior then. And I don't know if a lot of people will remember this, but you were tag team champion with the Dingo Warrior for World Class. So what did you kind of think of the Warrior? Everyone says he's, an eccentric personality.
I liked him a lot, too. We were good friends. And, we didn't go hang out together, but we did stay. We went to Atlanta together, and we were roommates a couple of times when we had a lady that was she was a promoter for television commercials and stuff and appearances, and her name was Jake, and I like him. He didn't like the Von Erichs.
He couldn't wait to get out of there, I guess, right?
Yeah, he just didn't like him. And, Kerry he put up with, I think everybody, Kerry was just a good guy. He was a little bit, because a lot of times when you see him, he's under the influence of something or another. And he was pretty funny in the fact that he, when you'd see him, he was a little bit stoned, but nice guy. He was very funny. I liked him, and I like most of all the guys. There was very few I didn't like.
Yeah, that's interesting. Everyone always says, they loved Kerry, out of everybody, and that he was the nicest and he was the most easiest to kind of get along with. Is that kind of just the exact way you saw it, too? He was the easiest of the Von Erichs to get along with?
Yeah, because he truly, maybe he didn't, maybe he didn't care, but he acted like he did. He was very complimentary. He had good manners. He was funny. He was friendly. Where Kevin was kind of like a mini Fritz. And I think for Kevin, I don't know. I think for Kevin it must have been difficult because obviously, Kerry out of that whole bunch obviously stood out. And so I think it might have been difficult for Kevin, because Kevin was just kind of average looking and kind of average, built. He wasn't anything special where Kerry was. Kerry could have, in reality, if Kerry wanted to pursue bodybuilding, he could have done really, really well. He had an awesome physique. Very few in the wrestling industry had the symmetry that he had. He of all the wrestlers that I have come in contact with, or met, he was probably had the best body.
Yeah, he's a Greek god. They say the modern day warrior. He really was. He was definitely in unbelievable shape. You mentioned that sometimes he was under the influence. Was that a huge problem backstage at World Class? Was there a lot of drugs and extracurricular activity going on?
For everybody, yeah. And me included. Everybody was into something or another. I don't want to. I'm not going to say what, but there's a lot of people that, were into, multiple different types of drugs. And,
now,
most of them. Huh?
I was going to say, as far as we're not getting into it, but I guess that was not only a problem for World Class. I'm sure that was a problem in other wrestling leagues you were in as well.
Well, I don't know because I didn't work in a lot of places. I only knew Oregon. I only knew World Class. I think that World Class had a bigger problem than Portland. I think that everybody in Portland, most everybody were drinkers. Big drinkers. With World Class, I think is a little bit more everything. I think that part of that is that when you're on the road for 12 hours, you go someplace and you get out and you wrestle and then you get back in a car and start driving back, it's a lot of time in a car, so I think that, you kind of, and to get up in the morning, some people needed a bump to get up in the morning, there's other people that needed something to put them to sleep, and others that needed something to relax them. And I'm not saying everybody did. There was quite a few, though.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard life, and to get from town to town and be able to wake up and do it the next day. I mean, that's definitely rough and a hard way to kind of do certain things, especially taking bumps and getting injured. And like you said, like Nord the Barbarian or somebody kind of injuring you. I mean, it makes it that much worse to travel from town to town.
Yeah, of course.
Now, as we hit the wind down, we head towards the finish. I got to ask you about the Nature Boy Ric Flair, obviously one of the most famous wrestlers of all time. You had the opportunity to wrestle him. You had an NWA World Title matches against him. What was kind of your thoughts on that? Was that a big deal at all to you, or not really? You didn't really know who Flair was?
No, I actually knew it was a real big deal. The thing is, I wasn't ready to actually wrestle him, and he was like, "Don't worry, I'll make you look good. You just go out there, you listen to me, kid, and you know." And I'd met him before. If you read in the book, he was an awesome guy. Great personality. Obviously in the ring and out of the ring, he was a champion, truly, and still is. But he, he actually said, "You don't have to worry about a thing. I'll make you actually look great out there. You just listen, kid." And I did. And, and he made me feel comfortable, and he could make anybody look good.
He's definitely one of the best, the Nature Boy. It's just amazing that he can make guys look better than they are, or even guys that are green or inexperienced, he makes them look like they're pros.
Well, also, it's not only that, it's the way he was. He didn't make you feel nervous, When I was in, the guys, when I was in Portland, Oregon, Jerry Gray, I had, with the heels, I had a real, they didn't want to work with me because they thought I was stiff, and I'd get in the ring with them, and that's anybody that's new, obviously. People don't want to get hurt. But Jerry Gray, he'd been in the business a long time. He never had a really breakout career, mid-card. But you know what? He made me feel comfortable in the ring, and I did really well with him. And I think that has something to do with how well somebody wrestles as well. Is if they're green, if you got somebody that is caring and says, "Hey, listen, we're gonna have a great match. You don't worry a bit. Don't worry about hurting me. I'll take care of myself. And you just listen to me. You're gonna have a good match." But if you got somebody that and there are people that "Hey, kid, you don't hurt me. We're gonna go out there and you be very easy with me." And of course you're gonna be nervous. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well. He had a calming way with him. So.
Yeah, I guess he's not doing too well now. Jerry's got some health problems. I believe he's got a big GoFundMe out there for anybody that wants to support him. But I know he was having a lot of health issues.
Well, I was talking about Flair at that just now, but Jerry Gray as well. Yeah, right. And he does have a lot of health. He's got stage 4 colon cancer, so I don't think he's going to be around a lot longer. He's having a hard time.
Yeah, unfortunately, yep. And you obviously talking about some of your big matches. Flair might be one of the most biggest, if not the biggest. The Freebirds. Do you look back and have some favorites, or like maybe some favorite opponents, guys you look back on very fondly? Outside of Flair, maybe favorite Freebirds.
I'll tell you the best matches I had in world class were actually with Buzz Sawyer and Matt Bourne. I liked wrestling, especially with Buzz. But I had some really good matches with Matt in South Africa. I was really, really big time over in South Africa, and as a babyface, and they would bring in talent from the rest of, from the States, and I was a babyface there, but I enjoyed wrestling Matt every time he came.
So good. And interesting, Buzz Sawyer. Usually you hear kind of some negative things, that he was stiff or snug or took advantage of stuff, and you're saying you like Buzz. So what's kind of been your experience with him?
Right. I like somebody wrestling a little snug. It didn't bother me at all. I didn't mind. Easier to sell, too. It's hard to, I think I wrote in Vinny wrote in the book about Mega Maharishi. I could barely touch him. He wouldn't let me touch him at all. It was crazy. I'd barely touch him, and he would cry. And then you get somebody like Kendo Nagasaki, which was on the other extreme. He was 5 times more stiff than Matt or Buzz. Just really, really stiff. So that's the only person I ever wrestled that I couldn't stand wrestling. He was just very stiff.
So you prefer almost that stiff, snug style because it looks more real, or it's easier to sell?
Yeah, grab a hold. It's okay. It's kind of wrestling, man. It didn't bother me at all.
Yep.
Buzz was a good guy. I liked him, and like I said, Matt too. Those were my 2 favorite, and I liked also wrestling with Black Bart. Not he wasn't stiff or anything, but I enjoyed wrestling with him. But those are 3 that come to mind that I actually enjoyed wrestling. Iceland King Parsons I like working with on on the tag team. Skip Young. I don't know if those guys are still even alive. I don't know, but I liked wrestling with them. I never wrestled against them, but yeah, there was a lot of people came through there. But those are the ones I can think of that I enjoyed really wrestling. Freebirds. I actually liked working with Freebirds. Terry Gordy. I liked wrestling a lot.
Freebirds were great, especially Gordy. I think he's probably the standout as far as wrestling for sure in that trio. As far as where you've wrestled, Israel, we mentioned South Africa, obviously Texas and Portland being the big ones. Where was your kind of favorite place that you ever wrestled?
Of all those?
Yeah, in your whole career.
South Africa by far. By far. South Africa for me was the best. In every way. The country's been very good to me. I've sold my business there, and in every way I had a great career there. So I don't think it could have worked out any better.
Now, you left World Class in 1987, and basically people kind of maybe not even realize, you used to wrestle for about 10 more years. Like we mentioned, all these different countries, of course, like you just said, South Africa, all these different places. I feel like a lot of people think that the retirement was in 87. Do you get that a lot from people? Like, wow, I can't believe you wrestled for 10 more years after that.
Well, most people don't even, because like I said, I've been so far removed from the States, that I don't really, just until recently, because I've got all these people bombarding me with, Facebook requests because of the book. I don't know how they can find me, but just recently. But yeah, I think that a lot of them were surprised to find out that I'd actually carried on. And the great thing about South Africa was I could pick and choose where I wanted to wrestle. I wasn't making my living that way. I had health clubs, and so for me, if there was someplace that I wanted to go and wrestle, I could do it. If I didn't want to do it, I didn't have to. If it was too far for me, I wouldn't go. If it was someplace I hadn't been, I would go. So for me, that was actually the ideal thing. Is to be able to wrestle when I wanted to wrestle and do the television when I wanted to do the television, because it helped my business. As far as people would come to my gyms just because of the exposure from the wrestling.
When you retired from wrestling, in '96? Was that just like, I'm done with the business? Was there any kind of thought of ever getting back in? Because like we're talking about, really, for 35 years, you just were like, yeah, I'm done with it, and that's the end of it. Was that you were just like done with it, just clean cut, boom, it's over?
I think so. The thing is that when I enjoyed it in South Africa. I hated it in the States. I got to hate it. I think I always hated it in the States. The thing is, I was offered many, many, many times to go do these, I don't know what you call them, they run in the States whenever they do, they bring old wrestlers back and they do
autograph signings, conventions and stuff.
Yeah, and they were paying $500 or $1,000, and they'd send me the ticket, and I never did it. I didn't, for $1,000 is not worth my time to even get on an airplane, in my mind, so I never did any of that, and I had people offer me always to, they pay for my trans to do that. I just never had any desire to do it. I didn't even want to do a book. In reality, I didn't even want to book that. Vinny sold me. I don't know how. There was something about him that, just in the way, I hope he's not listening, but just in the way that he actually, just the way he was, he's a charismatic guy. And he kind of convinced me into doing it. And, I anybody else, I wouldn't have done the book. We did it. We spent a lot of time. He called me on Sundays, and we spent a lot of time on the telephone. And a lot of this I didn't remember because I kind of put it out of my brain because it wasn't a happy time for me. Most of that Von Erich era there, Portland was better, and I have a better memory of Portland. I had a better time. But, it was just such a whirlwind and world class that I just didn't have time to enjoy anything about it, so I had a hard time remembering some of this stuff. But he did a great job. I was surprised because I gave him all this information, and he kind of, we cut a lot out of the book. It just kept coming, there's stuff that I thought of that, afterwards. Every time I hung up, I said, oh man, I should have told, that story, or oh man, I should have told this story. And, you just can't put it all in a book. But when he wrote the book, and he had written the book, and he had finished it, he sent me the chapters. And I didn't really even want to read it, actually, for some reason. And then all of a sudden, I kept telling him that I was reading the book, and I didn't. I read one or two chapters. But when it was all together, and he says, listen, you need to read this so we can, print it and get it going. I read the whole thing. And from cover to cover, from first chapter to the end of the chapter. And if I didn't know it was me, I would have, I would have liked the book even if I wasn't a wrestling fan. I just found it interesting the way he had written it. Not because it's of me, but the journey that it was, and all the stuff that happened in all that time, it was actually, I found it interesting. So, and I'm not saying that because it had anything to do with me. Just the way he wrote it. He's that good a writer. And I think he's got a big career in the future. And I don't know if it would be, wrestling, would be writing for wrestling, but I think he could write about anything.
He definitely did a great job with this book, and I think it's great to get you, not only because of your journey and everything you've been through, even out of wrestling. I think so many wrestling fans are dying to know and dying to hear from you after 35 years. I feel like the wrestling business has been missing you. I don't know if you realize that, but I think they've been missing you a lot.
No, I don't know. Like I said, it was kind of interesting to see all these people writing and saying that they were, fans of mine and wondered what happened to me, blah, 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 blah. And it was kind of interesting to see that from all over. People were writing me from places I didn't even know how they would even know me, from Pakistan and different places, and somehow they actually knew. A lot of them were kids when they were watching wrestling, obviously, so, 5, 6, 7 years old.
it is amazing now, especially with modern technology and them tracking you down one way or another, or seeing footage on YouTube, or remembering back when they were kids and watching it and seeing documentaries and stuff. It is amazing. Looking back, do you have any regrets as far as wrestling?
Having if it hadn't turned out the way it turned out, maybe. But you know what? The only regret that I would have had that I could possibly think of at the time is listening to Donnell and stayed there for a couple of years. You know, I what's kind of strange is I wasn't very good at doing the commercials. Like for when they tell you to talk about the towns, or when they doing the matches, when they'd actually do you'd talk about the next week's match. I just didn't have enough. I didn't have enough practice at the time. And I wish that I'd stayed in Portland and worked on that as well, because that's a lot of it is, that you can, what you can do on a microphone as well. And I think that if I'd stayed in Portland for a couple more years and I'd gone to, not messed my body up and actually kept on lifting weights and that, I could have gone to New York, and I think I could have done very well there. Having said that, it is what it is, and it came out okay anyway. If I was broke, and I was on welfare or whatever, looking back, then maybe I would, I'd have a lot of regrets, but I don't. So it all turned out good.
Absolutely.
I'm on the roof of my house next to the ocean and a golf course, looking out at the moon right now. So it's good.
There's a nice kind of scenery to think about it, and think about it in my mind for sure. When you look back at Lance Von Erich and look at the wrestling career, what do you think is kind of the legacy, or what's the stamp of Lance Von Erich kind of looking back?
That legacy?
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, I think that I had a great time. I was at the right place at the right time for a very short flash that I think I gave some of the fans, at least before I'd actually quit, some good memories. And I think that, I hope they enjoyed it when we were there. I know that it didn't last too much longer after I left anyway, for the whole thing. It actually, it kind of ran into the ground. But I hope that, I hope that the fans enjoyed it while we were there.
And the fans can learn even more about you by going to lancebychance.com and picking up the book, Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich, of course, by you and Vinnie Berry. Such a great book. I can't recommend it enough. It's a rare glimpse and a rare look at you. Like you said, you've been out of the business 35 years, so fans, I mean, it's not just wrestling. There's some other awesome stuff in there. Like, we only touched the tip of the iceberg about the bomb on the train and the plane hijacking and stuff. So it's just so good and so interesting. Just want to mention that again, lancebychance.com. Lance, do you have any other plugs you like to give? I know you're a pretty private guy. I don't know if there's any social media out there, anything you like to give other than the website where everybody can get the book.
Yeah, contact Vinny. he'll send you a book. We're actually signing books too, so if you want to sign a book, Vinny can organize that for you as well. Any of you ex-fans want to come to Mexico, let me know. Got a place for you to stay.
Awesome, and it's great that you're doing great down there. Like I said, been out of the business 35 years, but it hasn't been missed by you at all. You haven't been missing it, which is good. So, Mr. Von Erich, thank you so much for all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. All right, guys. Okay, thanks again. Buenas noches.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.